fresh snow, until deep claw marks cut through it, leading away from the trees toward something hidden. Under a collapsed trailer, a German shepherd lay trapped beneath a heavy wooden beam, silent, watching every move. The Navy SEAL didn't rush in. He tied a rope, set his footing, and pulled the beam free inch by inch. The dog crawled out on its own, shaking, injured, but refusing to run. The soldier turned back toward the cabin, and the dog followed a few steps, then stopped, staring into the dark forest behind them. He went inside first, but left the door open. After a moment, the dog stepped in too. "Where are you watching from today?" Like the video and subscribe to K9 Navy SEAL Legends. Reed Calder did not drive into the Idaho backcountry looking for peace. Peace implied healing, and healing required hope. He had neither. At 28, Reed was officially listed as on medical hold, a phrase that sounded clean, bureaucratic, almost gentle. In truth, it meant his body had healed faster than his mind, and the Navy had run out of missions it trusted him to complete without watching him too closely. So he left before they could decide for him. The road narrowed as the snow deepened, pine trees pressing in like silent witnesses. Reed's pickup crawled through the valley, tires crunching over frozen gravel, the engine humming low and steady. He drove with both hands on the wheel, posture straight, shoulders squared out of habit rather than comfort. The cabin stood near an abandoned ranger station. Weathered wood, a sagging porch, windows clouded by frost. It was far enough from town that no one would stop by unannounced, close enough to the forest that sound disappeared into snow before it could echo back. Perfect. Reed unloaded slowly. A single duffel bag, a toolbox, a crate of canned food. Everything he owned fit into the bed of his truck now. He moved with the efficiency of someone trained to leave no trace, even though there was no one here to notice. Inside, the cabin smelled of old pine and cold iron. He lit the stove, stacked firewood, checked every latch and window. The routine came automatically. Check. Pause. Listen. Check again. That night, Reed did not sleep. He lay on the narrow bed, boots placed neatly beside it, eyes fixed on the ceiling. The silence pressed down on him, not peaceful, not empty, but heavy. In the quiet, memories filled the space like smoke. Distant explosions, the weight of gear on his shoulders, the moment before impact when time slowed and every decision mattered. Here, there were no decisions to make. That frightened him more than any mission ever had. Morning arrived pale and colorless, the sky blending into the snow until the world felt unfinished. Reed stepped outside, breath fogging in the cold, scanning the ground out of habit. That was when he saw the tracks. They were not human, too uneven, dragged, not walked. He followed them along the edge of the tree line until they led to a collapsed travel trailer half buried in snow, its white metal skin rusted and caved in. Something dark shifted beneath it. Reed stopped. Training kicked in, not the urge to rush, but the instinct to assess. The dog lay partially pinned under a fallen plank, ribs visible beneath ice-clumped fur. A German shepherd, adult, male. Thin to the point of fragility, but not broken. One hind leg was trapped awkwardly, the angle wrong, but not hopeless. The dog did not bark, did not whine, did not struggle. He froze. Amber eyes tracked Reed with unsettling focus. Not wild, not pleading, calculating. The dog's body trembled, but his gaze never left Reed's hands. Reed crouched slowly, palms open, keeping his movements deliberate. "Easy," he said quietly, his voice low and controlled, the same tone he'd used to steady panicked teammates in worse conditions. "I'm not going to hurt you." The dog blinked once, that was all. Reed did not touch him right away. Instead, he looped a rope around the fallen plank, braced his boot against a rock, and used leverage rather than strength. The wood shifted, snow sliding off in clumps. When the pressure eased, the dog pulled himself free. He collapsed onto the snow, shaking violently, breath coming in shallow bursts. Reed stayed where he was, resisting the urge to reach out. He knew what panic felt like. He knew how touch could become a threat if it came too fast. After a long moment, the dog stood. His legs wobbled, but he stayed upright. Reed rose slowly and stepped back, giving space. "You're okay," he said, though he wasn't sure who he was talking to anymore. When Reed turned toward the cabin, the dog followed. 2 steps, hesitant, uncertain. Then he stopped. Reed glanced over his shoulder. The German shepherd had turned back toward the forest, head lowered, ears alert, eyes fixed on the trees, as if listening to something Reed could not hear. His body went rigid, muscles taut, weight shifted forward. He stood like a barrier, like a warning. Reed frowned. "You coming?" The dog didn't move. For a brief, irrational moment, Reed felt the urge to look where the dog was looking, to scan the tree line, to check the wind, to listen harder. The feeling was unsettling, almost intrusive, as if the dog's vigilance was bleeding into his own awareness. Reed shook it off. Animals reacted to stress, trauma, hunger. He knew that. Still, he left the cabin door open. Inside, the warmth slowly crept back into the space. Reed set out water and a small amount of food, keeping his distance. The dog hovered near the doorway, eyes darting, never fully relaxing. Reed noticed the scars then, faint lines beneath, the fur at the dog's neck. Not from fighting, not random. They were too clean, training scars. "You're not a stray," Reed murmured. The dog's ears twitched. Reed leaned back against the wall, watching the fire crackle. Something about the dog's posture, the controlled stillness, the way he tracked sound, felt painfully familiar, like looking into a mirror he hadn't expected to find. The sound came just after noon. A low, distant crack, sharp, metallic, not quite an explosion, not quite natural. Reed stiffened instantly. The dog reacted faster. The German shepherd surged forward and planted himself directly in front of Reed, body rigid, eyes locked on the door. He did not bark, did not growl. He simply stood there, blocking the path. Reed's pulse quickened. His hand moved unconsciously toward his belt before he caught himself. He forced his breathing to slow. Another sound followed. Muffled voices, far away, carried briefly on the wind before disappearing again. The dog did not move. Reed stared at him, unease curling in his chest. This wasn't panic. This wasn't fear. This was recognition. "What do you hear?" Reed whispered. The dog's gaze flicked to him for the first time. Not scared, not submissive, but deliberate, as if asking a question of his own. Reed felt it then, the shift, the subtle tightening in the air, the sense that the quiet around the cabin was no longer empty, but waiting. He didn't step outside. Not yet. The rest of the afternoon passed slowly. Reed worked on the cabin, repairing a loose step, stacking firewood. The dog remained close, but never crowded him, always positioning himself with a clear view of the surroundings. When the sun dipped low and the cold sharpened, Reed sat by the fire again. The dog finally lay down, not at his feet, not at the wall, but near the doorway, facing outward, guarding. Reed studied him in the firelight. The dog's breathing was steadier now, exhaustion weighing him down. But, even in rest, his ears twitched at every sound. "You don't trust this place," Reed said softly. The dog exhaled slowly, eyes half-lidded but alert. Reed nodded to himself. Neither do I. He didn't name the dog. Names meant attachment, promises, responsibility. But as the fire burned low and the snow thickened outside, Reed realized something had already shifted. The cabin no longer felt empty. The silence had shape now, shared, measured, watchful. And for the first time since leaving the service, Reed did not feel like he was standing guard alone. Morning broke with a brittle light that made the snow look like glass. Reed Calder stepped outside the cabin and let the cold bite his lungs awake. The forest stood still, every branch stiff with frost, the silence so complete it felt engineered rather than natural. Kestrel was already up. The German shepherd stood a few paces from the porch, body angled toward the valley, ears rotating in small, precise movements. His posture had changed since yesterday, less tremor, more intent. The dog wasn't guarding the cabin anymore. He was listening to the land. Reed watched him for a moment. "You hear something I don't," he said quietly. Kestrel didn't look back. The sound came minutes later, a low, uneven whine that grew into the clatter of an engine fighting cold. A snowmobile crested the ridge and slid into view, paint chipped, exhaust coughing. The rider slowed, lifted a gloved hand in greeting, and cut the engine before it reached the porch. She was older, early 60s, maybe, but carried herself with the careful strength of someone who had learned how to fall without breaking. Her build was lean, shoulders narrow, posture slightly stooped from years of hauling gear. Wisps of silver hair escaped a knit cap and framed a weathered face, creased not by bitterness, but by exposure. Her eyes were sharp and pale, the kind that missed little and forgave even less. June Halbrook swung a boot over the snowmobile and took in the scene. The cabin, the truck, Reed's stance, the dog's position. "That's not a stray," she said, nodding at Kestrel before Reed could speak. Reed's brow furrowed. "You're sure?" June smiled faintly. "I'm sure the way you're sure when you've spent 30 winters pulling people out of places they shouldn't have been." She extended a hand. "June Halbrook, volunteer search and rescue, or what's left of it." Her handshake was firm, fingers calloused, grip steady. Reed noticed the small scars across her, knuckles, old, white lines that told stories without asking to be heard. "Reed," he said. "Calder." June studied him with open curiosity. "Military?" It wasn't a question. Reed shrugged. "Was." She let that sit. "You stand like someone who learned to wait in bad places." Kestrel shifted then, stepping closer to Reed's leg, eyes never leaving June. Not aggressive, assessing, June noticed. "He's trained," she said softly. "Not just obedience, situational awareness. You don't teach that to pets." She reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a folded map, edges softened by time. "I was headed to Slate Bend," she said. "Thought I'd check in." Reed's jaw tightened. "What's at Slate Bend?" June exhaled. "A problem." She laid the map across the hood of Reed's truck, smoothing it with a gloved palm. The paper showed contour lines and handwritten notes. Old trail markers, elevation changes, warnings scrawled in pencil. "Last 3 winters," June said, tapping the canyon's narrow throat. "We've had incidents here. Skiers, snowshoers, one backcountry guide. They go missing within a half-mile stretch. Phones lose signal right here." Her finger traced a neat arc. "Always the same dead zone." "And you can't find them," Reed said. "We find some," June corrected. "Eventually. Not all. And when we do..." She hesitated. "The timelines don't add up." Reed crossed his arms. "What do you mean?" "I mean Crow Rapid Rescue always gets there fast," she said. Too fast for a private outfit, sometimes before we do. Sometimes they come back with a body, sometimes with nothing. And the reports never quite match the terrain. Kestrel stiffened. June reached into her bag again and withdrew a glove sealed in a plastic pouch. It was black, synthetic, the fingers stiff with cold. She didn't open it. "Found this near the last site," she said. "Didn't belong to the missing skier. Didn't belong to us." Kestrel moved. He closed the distance in 2 quiet steps and lowered his head to the pouch, nostrils flaring. His body went rigid. Then he did something Reed had not seen yet. He backed away and planted himself squarely between June and the cabin door. Blocking. June froze. "That's specific." Reed frowned. "He's still recovering," he said. "Probably stress." June's eyes flicked to him, then back to the dog. "Stress doesn't make a dog identify solvents and metals." She held up the pouch. "That glove smells wrong." Kestrel didn't growl. He didn't bark. He simply stood there, unmoving, as if the space itself had narrowed. Reed felt the first hairline crack in his certainty. "Crow Rapid Rescue," he said. "You're saying they're involved?" "I'm saying," June replied carefully, "that people don't vanish by accident in the same place 3 winters in a row." Reed glanced toward the tree line. The forest had that watchful quiet again, the kind that felt less like peace and more like restraint. "I can take a look," he said. "Just recon." June's mouth tightened. "You don't know Slate Bend." Reed met her gaze. "I know terrain that kills." She studied him for a long beat, then nodded once. "All right, but not alone." They set out by mid-morning. The trail cut along the ridge before dropping toward the canyon mouth. Snow packed hard beneath their boots, the air sharp enough to sting. June moved steadily, her pace economical, conserving energy. Reed noticed how she checked landmarks against the map without slowing. Kestrel ranged ahead, then back, then ahead again. Never far, always returning to Reed's side before pushing forward. He paused at a fork where the trail narrowed and turned sharply downhill. June pointed. "That's the usual route?" Kestrel blocked it. Reed stopped short. "Kestrel." The dog didn't budge. June watched, eyebrows lifting. "He's refusing." "He's wrong," Reed said, more firmly than he felt. The map, a hollow whoomp, cut the air. The ground beneath Reed's left foot gave way. Snow collapsed into emptiness, a thin crust over a void. Reed dropped, arms flailing, boots scraping. He caught a rock with his right hand, pain flaring up his arm as his shoulder screamed. Kestrel lunged, not toward the hole, but behind Reed, bracing himself, planting his weight, body pressed against Reed's calves. The pressure was deliberate, controlled, enough to counterbalance. Reed hauled himself back onto solid ground, heart hammering. Silence returned, thick and unforgiving. June stared at the collapse, then at the dog. That wasn't on the map. Reed swallowed. He looked at Kestrel, who stood steady now, breathing even, eyes on Reed's face. "Okay," Reed said quietly. "You win." June let out a breath she'd been holding. "That pocket opens after fresh snowfall," she said. "If you'd gone down." Reed nodded. He didn't finish the thought. They detoured, following the line Kestrel indicated. Longer, steeper, safer. As they moved, Reed felt something shift inside him. A recalibration he hadn't expected to make. They reached a stand of dead pines where the air smelled faintly sweet and wrong. Kestrel stopped. He lowered his head and sniffed the snow, then the bark, then the air. His tail went still. Slowly, deliberately, he turned his head toward June's map. specifically to a pencil mark she hadn't mentioned. June followed his gaze. "That's an old notation," she said. "From before my time." Kestrel lifted his head and looked straight at Reed. Not alert, not afraid, certain. Reed felt the uncanny sense that the dog wasn't reacting to what was there, but to what shouldn't be. By the time they reached the canyon overlook, the light had shifted. Shadows pooled in the bends below, the wind threading through stone like a warning whispered too late. June packed her map away. "That's enough for today," she said. "We go back before dark." Reed agreed. He didn't argue. Not now. As they turned back, he caught Kestrel glancing once more toward Slate Bend, ears angled, body tense. The dog memorized the place. Reed felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Back at the cabin, June mounted her snowmobile. "I'll check in tomorrow," she said, "if you're still here." Reed nodded. "I'll be here." She hesitated, then added, "Trust your dog." Reed watched her disappear into the trees, the engine noise swallowed by snow. Kestrel stepped onto the porch and lay down facing the valley. Reed closed the door behind them. The click loud in the quiet. For the first time since he arrived, he locked it. The tracks led them higher than June had expected. By late morning, the wind had sharpened and the sky had taken on a flat, bleached look that meant weather was thinking about changing its mind. Reed moved carefully along the ridge, eyes scanning not just the snow ahead, but the subtle signs beneath it. Drifts shaped the wrong way, shadows that hinted at hollowness. Kestrel worked the edge of the path, nose low, then lifting to test the air, his movements economical and precise. They reached the clearing just before Slate Bend widened into a shallow basin. A parking area sat half buried under fresh snow. No cars, no people, just the faint geometry of tire marks pressed into ice and dusted over as if the mountain had tried to erase them. Reed crouched and brushed the surface with a gloved hand. The pattern underneath was recent. Too recent to belong to hikers who had gone missing weeks ago. June frowned. Someone was here after the last snowfall. Reed followed the tracks to the edge of the basin. The wind carried sound now, metal clinks, a distant hum. He lifted his binoculars and found them. Crow Rapid Rescue. Their camp was set neatly on a rise. Bright tents staked cleanly, banners flapping with practiced visibility. A portable speaker crackled to life, broadcasting instructions into the void. Two men in matching jackets paced the perimeter, cameras mounted on tripods pointed toward the canyon mouth. They looked ready. They did not look busy. "Why aren't they moving?" Reed asked. June lowered her binoculars. "Because moving would mean risk. And risk doesn't look good on video." As if on cue, one of the men raised a hand and spoke into a camera, voice amplified by the speaker. "We're establishing a safety perimeter. Conditions are unstable. We advise all parties to remain clear." Kestrel stopped. His body went rigid, head angled toward the canyon edge. He sniffed once, then again, faster this time. His tail stilled completely. Reed felt it, the change in the dog's breathing, the subtle tightening of muscle. He followed Kestrel's line of sight and caught the faintest sheen along the snowbank, a slickness that didn't belong. Fuel. A thin, invisible smear at the rim of the basin. June saw it too. "Gasoline," she said quietly, "or solvent. That shouldn't be here." Kestrel stepped forward, then blocked, squarely between Reed and the basin. He did not look back. Reed raised a hand. "Hold," he said, more to himself than the dog. "Let's verify." June's jaw set. "Reed." "I know," he cut in. "But if Crow's right and the shelf's unstable, rushing in could trigger—" A shout echoed from below. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The snow moved. Not a roar, not a wall. Just a sudden, sliding breath as a slab sheared off and rolled down slope. It wasn't big. Nothing like the avalanches Reed had seen in training videos. But it was enough. Enough to swallow a man standing, lower on the basin floor. Reed ran. By the time he reached the edge, the slide had settled into silence. The speaker crackled uselessly. One of Crow's men stood frozen on the rise, staring down slope with a hand half raised as if caught between orders. Reed slid down on his heels, careful and fast, scanning for movement. Kestrel followed but stayed back, eyes locked on the snowfield. They found the helmet first. A bright shell cracked along one side, half buried where the slide had thinned. Reed dug with his hands, fingers burning, breath tight in his chest. There was no body exposed, no arm, no sign. June knelt beside him, face pale but steady. She touched the helmet, then looked at the slope. If he's under the main pack. She didn't finish. Crow's team arrived late and loud, cameras still rolling. A tall man with a trimmed beard and an expensive jacket barked orders into a radio, voice clipped and confident. He had a sharp face, angles like he'd been carved from stone, and eyes that never quite softened, even when he pretended concern. "Stand back," he said, noticing Reed's hands in the snow. "This area's compromised." Reed stood slowly. He didn't argue. He didn't speak. Kestrel watched the man with an intensity that bordered on accusation. They returned to the cabin at dusk. No one blamed Reed. June didn't say a word about the 60 seconds. She didn't need to. The truth sat heavy between them, unspoken and undeniable. Inside, Reed lit the stove and sat on the floor with his back against the wall. His hands shook once, then steadied. He stared into the fire and replayed the moment. The decision to wait, to confirm, to be certain. Certainty had cost time. Time had cost a life. Kestrel lay beside him, not touching, not distant, present. His breathing was slow and even, a quiet counterpoint to the storm in Reed's chest. "I should have moved," Reed said aloud. His voice didn't break. That scared him more than if it had. Kestrel didn't respond. He didn't need to. Near midnight, Reed woke to the sound of snow ticking against glass. Kestrel was standing at the window, body tense, ears angled forward. Reed followed his gaze and saw a faint red glow flicker and die on the ridge, like a cigarette ember, gone too fast to confirm. Kestrel let out a single, controlled breath and sat. Not alarmed. Resolved. Reed felt the hair on his arms lift. The dog wasn't reacting to danger now. He was remembering it. Sleep came in fragments. When morning arrived, it brought a thin layer of new snow and the dull ache of consequence. June stopped by briefly, leaving supplies and a quiet nod. "We'll keep searching," she said, "but Crow's taking point." Reed nodded back. He didn't argue. After she left, Reed walked the perimeter alone, replaying the basin in his mind. He noticed things he'd missed before. How Crow's camp had been placed just out of the wind's worst path. How the fuel smear lined up with a narrow chute. Kestrel paced with him, stopping at the edge of the porch to sniff the air, then turning away from the basin entirely. Reed followed the dog's eyes and saw something he hadn't noticed before. A faint line where snow had been disturbed uphill, not down. Someone had moved before the slide. He crouched and traced it with his glove. The pattern wasn't random. It was deliberate. Reed straightened slowly. He wasn't ready to accuse anyone. Not yet. But the mountain hadn't taken a life by chance. That night, Reed sat by the fire again. Kestrel sat beside him, close enough now that Reed could feel the warmth through the fabric of his sleeve. "I won't wait again," Reed said softly. "Not when you tell me otherwise." Kestrel leaned into him, just enough to be felt. Outside, the wind rose and fell, carrying the echoes of a choice already made. Ridgehaven sat in a shallow bowl between ridgelines, its winter street swept clean by a wind that never seemed to rest. The town was small enough that everyone noticed a stranger, but quiet enough that no one asked questions unless they had to. Reed parked beside a low brick building with a fading sign, Ridgehaven Veterinary Clinic, and shut off the engine. Kestrel jumped down first. His gait was steady now, the stiffness from his injury fading, but Reed could still see the caution in the way the dog placed his weight. The German Shepherd's coat had lost some of its frost-matted look. Black and tan fur lay flat and dense against a lean, powerful frame. He moved with contained energy, eyes alert, head level, trained, but unfinished. Inside, the clinic smelled of antiseptic and wet wool. A bell chimed softly as they entered. Dr. Ellen Pike looked up from the counter. She was in her late 40s, tall and spare, with iron-gray hair pulled into a practical knot. Her face had a calm, precise symmetry, softened by kind eyes that missed very little. Years of working with animals had shaped her movements, unhurried, deliberate, gentle without being sentimental. "What can I help you with?" she asked. Reed nodded toward Kestrel. "Checkup. History's unclear." Dr. Pike knelt, letting Kestrel sniff her hand. He accepted the contact, tail low but relaxed. She examined him thoroughly, teeth, joints, scars, her fingers pausing briefly at the faint ring of damaged skin around his neck. "Harness abrasion," she said. "Old. Heavy-duty collar or specialized lead. Not civilian." Reed leaned against the wall. So he was K9. "Yes," she replied, "but not all the way through. His responses are strong, but there are gaps, like training that stopped abruptly." She glanced at Reed. "Dogs don't forget that kind of work." Reed thought of Slate Bend, of 60 seconds. While Dr. Pike finished her notes, the door opened again. Cold air rushed in, followed by a woman in a sheriff's deputy jacket. She was in her early 30s, medium height, athletic build, with dark hair braided tight against her scalp. Her face was angular, cheekbones sharp, eyes a clear steel gray that evaluated before they judged. "Deputy Mara Voss," she said, offering Reed a professional nod. "Mind if I ask a few questions?" She spoke evenly, without hostility. Reed appreciated that. They talked outside, away from the waiting room. Mara leaned against her cruiser, arms crossed loosely, posture alert, but not aggressive. "Crow Rapid Rescue has a temporary contract with the county," she said. "They're insured. They've got paperwork for natural hazard exemptions. Unless there's evidence of direct harm, there's not much I can do." "Even if people keep disappearing in the same place?" Reed asked. Mara's jaw tightened. "I don't like it either. But law doesn't move on patterns and feelings. It moves on proof." Reed nodded. He'd expected that answer. Inside, Kestrel paced the waiting room, nose low. There were only two other people, a woman with a cat carrier and a man in a branded jacket, backpack resting at his feet. The man had a broad chest and square shoulders, beard trimmed close, posture relaxed in the way of someone comfortable taking up space. He glanced at Kestrel with mild annoyance. Kestrel stopped. He turned toward the backpack. His nostrils flared. His body went still. Dr. Pike noticed immediately. "That's interesting." The man frowned. Hey, control your dog. Reed stepped closer, eyes on Kestrel. The dog moved forward once, then blocked the path between Reed and the man, head angled toward the bag. Not threatening, certain. Reed crouched. What is it? Kestrel huffed softly, a short breath through his nose, then looked up at Reed. Dr. Pike inhaled sharply. He's alerting. Mara re-entered just in time to see it. Alerting to what? Reed met her gaze. The same smell we found at the canyon. Solvent. Fuel. The man stood abruptly. That's ridiculous. Mara raised a hand. Sir, would you mind opening the bag? There was a pause. Too long. Then the man unzipped it halfway. Inside were ropes, carabiners, a coil of cable, and a small canister with a faded hazard label. Mara's eyes hardened. You work for Crow Rapid Rescue? The man swallowed. Contractor. Mara took the bag. You'll need to come with me. As they left, Kestrel watched until the door closed. Only then did his posture ease. Reed felt something click into place. Crow didn't cause the accidents. Crow exploited them. On the drive back to the cabin, Reed stopped at a turnout overlooking the valley. He stepped out, scanning the slopes, replaying the morning in his head. Kestrel exited the truck and moved to the guardrail. He sniffed once, then twice, then turned. Not toward Slate Bend, but toward the opposite ridge. He fixed his gaze on a narrow tree, line Reed hadn't considered. The dog sat, waited. Reed followed the line with his eyes and felt a chill crawl up his spine. The place Kestrel watched wasn't where the accidents happened. It was where someone could watch them. Night came early. Clouds rolled in, swallowing the stars. Reed cooked by lantern light, the quiet punctuated by the stove's low hiss. He checked the generator, everything normal, then settled in with a mug of coffee gone cold. The lights went out without warning. The cabin fell into complete darkness. Reed was on his feet instantly, hand on the wall, senses snapping awake. Outside, the wind had dropped. The silence was unnatural. He clicked on his headlamp. It flickered, then steadied. Kestrel was already on the stairs. The German shepherd stood squarely across the narrow rise leading to the sleeping loft, body rigid, head low, ears forward. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He stood guard. Reed moved to the window and saw them. Prints in the fresh. Snow around the porch. Boot soles, heavy tread. At least 2 sets. They circled once, testing, then moved off toward the tree line. Reed waited. Minutes passed. Then more. Kestrel did not move. Only when the generator hummed back to life did Reed exhale. He checked the breaker. Manually tripped. Someone had wanted him in the dark. Reed sat on the bottom step, the weight of it settling in his chest. This wasn't curiosity anymore. It wasn't coincidence. Kestrel remained where he was, vigilant and silent. Until dawn lightened the windows, Reed reached out and rested a hand against the dog's shoulder. Solid. Real. Okay, Reed murmured. I'm listening now. Outside, the valley lay quiet under new snow, as if nothing had happened. But Reed knew better. The call came just after dawn. June's voice crackled through the radio, thin and strained by wind. Group of skiers overdue. North face above Slate Bend. 6 hours past check-in. Reed was already pulling on his jacket before she finished. Outside, the sky hung low and gray, the kind of ceiling that flattened sound and made distance hard to judge. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, not enough to bury tracks, but enough to soften edges, enough to hide mistakes. Kestrel stood at the door, muscles coiled, eyes sharp. The German shepherd had changed again. The restless uncertainty that once lived in his movements was gone. What remained was focus. Quiet, contained, deliberate. His black and tan coat blended too easily with the shadowed snow line, his breath barely visible in the cold. They reached the staging area an hour later. Crow Rapid Rescue was already there. Bright jackets, clean vehicles. A portable mast extended skyward, camera mounted and rolling. A small crowd clustered at the edge of the tape. Locals, a pair of reporters, one freelance videographer angling for the best shot. The air buzzed with urgency, but also something else. Performance. Reed took it in without comment. 2 skiers had been located, according to the chatter. One near the surface, injured but responsive. The other, deeper, off the main route. No signal, no clear access. Crow's team moved fast toward the first. "Easy win," one of their men muttered, not quietly enough. Reed watched as the stretcher came out, cameras closing in. The injured skier, a young man with a bloody brow and a photogenic grimace, was guided into frame. Microphones followed. Questions flew. Behind him, the mountain waited. Kestrel shifted at Reed's side. His ears angled away from the noise, toward the wind. He sniffed once, then again, then pulled gently at the lead. Reed followed the dog's gaze and felt his stomach tighten. The wind cut across the slope from the west, carrying something faint but unmistakable. Human scent, weak, fragmented, fading, mixed with it metal, plastic. The sterile tang of equipment left too long in the cold. "Kestrel," Reed murmured. The dog stepped forward, then stopped, looking back once to make sure Reed was paying attention. Then he turned and headed uphill, away from the cameras, away from the easy path. Reed hesitated. Crow's lead rescuer glanced over. "You're not authorized to operate here," he called. His voice was smooth, practiced. "We've got this covered." Reed looked at the crowd, at the lens trained on the stretcher, at the man being loaded into an ambulance with applause. Then he looked at Kestrel. The dog had stopped again, waiting. Reed exhaled and followed. The climb was brutal. The slope narrowed into a shallow chute, snow crusted thin over loose rock. Reed moved slowly, testing each step, heart hammering. Kestrel ranged ahead, then back, then ahead again, always keeping the line taut but controlled. They found the equipment first. A ski pole snapped clean in half, a pack torn open, contents spilled and half buried. The smell was stronger here. Sweat, fear, breath turned shallow by cold. Kestrel dropped his head and whined softly, the sound barely audible over the wind. They rounded a bend and saw him. The second skier lay wedged between 2 boulders, one leg twisted at an impossible angle. He was older than the first, late 40s maybe, with a graying beard crusted with ice and skin gone pale beneath frostbite's creeping edge. His eyes fluttered open when Reed knelt beside him. "Hey," Reed said, voice calm, steady. "I've got you." The man's lips moved. "They came," he whispered. "Early." Reed's hand stilled for half a second. "Who came?" "Rescue," the man breathed. "They said, wait, safer. They'd be back." Reed swallowed. Kestrel pressed close, his body radiating heat, his presence anchoring the moment. The dog's eyes never left the man's face, tracking each shallow breath. Reed worked quickly, splinting, insulating, marking their position. He called it in on his radio, but the signal died halfway through the transmission. No surprise there. By the time they began the descent, the light had shifted. Clouds thickened, swallowing the ridge. Snow started again, soft at first, then heavier. They moved in silence. Halfway down, Reed felt it. The sensation that had followed him since the service. The one that came before things went wrong. Being watched. He glanced upslope. Kestrel stopped dead. The dog turned his head slowly, eyes locking onto a distant rise. For a heartbeat, Reed thought he saw movement, dark against white. But then, it was gone. Kestrel didn't bark. He lowered his head and leaned into the harness, urging Reed onward. Whatever was up there, it wasn't their priority. Not yet. They reached the tree line just as the storm began to close in. June met them with a snowmobile and a blanket, her face drawn tight with relief and anger in equal measure. "Crow called it," she said. "Media's already packing up." Reed didn't answer. The man on the stretcher gripped Reed's sleeve weakly. "Thank you," he said. His voice shook, but his eyes were clear now, alive. No cameras captured it. No applause followed. By the time they returned to the staging area, the crowd was gone. Only tire tracks and trampled snow remained. Crow's vehicles were already pulling away. Deputy Mara Voss stood near her cruiser, arms crossed, jaw set. She looked from the empty slope to the injured man being loaded quietly into an unmarked vehicle. "Where were you?" she asked Reed. Reed met her gaze. Saving the one who couldn't be filmed. Her lips pressed into a thin line. That night, the story broke anyway. Headlines painted Reed as reckless, as a vigilante, as someone who interfered with a coordinated rescue. Comment sections filled with outrage. Who gave him the right? He put, "Lives at risk. This is why professionals exist." Reed turned off the radio. Later, Mara visited the cabin. She didn't sit. She didn't take off her jacket. "The man you pulled out gave a statement," she said. "He told me they arrived early. Told him to wait." Reed said nothing. Mara exhaled. "That changes things. Not enough, but some." She paused at the door. "You didn't do anything illegal today." Reed looked down at Kestrel, who sat at his side, posture relaxed for the first time since morning. "I know," Reed said. "I did something necessary." After she left, Reed stepped outside. The storm had passed, leaving the world clean and quiet again. Kestrel stood beside him, shoulder to knee, facing the dark slope. No cameras, no noise, just truth. The sabotage came quietly. June Halbrook noticed it first when her truck refused to start in the gray light before dawn. The engine turned once, coughed, and died. When she stepped out to check the hood, she smelled it. Sweet, wrong, unmistakable, fuel where fuel didn't belong. A clean-cut hose, no panic, no theatrics. Just a message delivered with precision. She didn't call it in right away. She walked the perimeter instead, breath steady, eyes cataloging details the way decades of rescue work had trained her to do. Tire impressions she didn't recognize. A boot print with a shallow heel bite. Someone had wanted to slow her down, not scare her off. Across the valley, Reed Calder was learning the same lesson from a different angle. Deputy Mara Voss met him outside the courthouse annex in Ridgehaven, her expression tighter than usual. She looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, braid pulled too tight as if discipline alone could hold things together. "They filed a complaint," she said without preamble. "Unauthorized entry, interference with an active operation. They're saying you crossed into restricted land near the old ranger station." Reed didn't react. "Did I?" Mara's jaw worked. "That's not the point. They want leverage. Kestrel stood at Reed's side, posture calm, ears tracking the morning sounds. The German shepherd's presence had become something people noticed now. Noticed and stepped around, as if instinct warned them not to crowd the space he claimed. "They're escalating," Mara continued. "Quietly. The kind of quiet that ruins people." Reed nodded once. "So what do we do?" Mara looked past him toward the mountains. "We stop guessing." The ranger station sat abandoned on a narrow spur above the tree line, its windows boarded and its door hanging crooked on rusted hinges. It had been decommissioned years ago when budgets tightened and patrol routes shifted. No power, no heat, no reason for anyone to be there, which made Kestrel's reaction impossible to ignore. The dog slowed as they approached, nose lifting, then dropped again, tracing an invisible line toward the building. His movements sharpened, confidence replacing caution. June joined them on foot, having borrowed a neighbor's truck. She looked smaller without her snowmobile, but no less formidable. "If they're hiding something," she said, "it won't be where cameras go." Inside, the station smelled of old wood and dust. Reed moved carefully, eyes scanning for tripwires out of habit. Kestrel bypassed the obvious rooms and went straight to the back, toward a storage alcove half hidden beneath the stairs. He stopped, sat, stared at the floor. Reed crouched. The boards were warped, nails half pulled, as if someone had rushed the job. He pried one loose with a gloved hand and found the box beneath. A dull metal case, edges scratched, lid sealed with tape long since yellowed. Inside were radios, batteries, a compact GPS unit, and a data stick wrapped in oilcloth. Everything labeled with dates and times. Not proof in the cinematic sense, no smoking gun, but enough to map patterns, enough to compare arrival times, signal outages, and movement logs. June exhaled slowly. They were tracking the chaos. Mara swallowed, and choosing when to step in. Reed didn't touch the data. He didn't need to. The weight of it pressed against his chest anyway. As Mara photographed the contents, Kestrel's ears snapped toward the door. Footsteps. Not hurried. Measured. Reed rose silently, placing himself between the sound and the others. Kestrel shifted with him, shoulder aligned to Reed's knee, eyes locked forward. The footsteps paused, then retreated. No confrontation, no threats, just confirmation. They were no longer invisible. Back in town, the pressure closed in. Crow Rapid Rescue's legal counsel called. The county administrator left a message. Someone leaked the complaint against Reed to a local blog, framing him as a liability the community could no longer afford. Mara sat alone in her office long after sunset. The ranger station photos spread across her desk. Her uniform jacket hung on the back of her chair, badge catching the light. She stared at it as if it might speak. She thought about her father, career lawman, rule follower, the kind who believed patience always paid off. She thought about the skiers who hadn't come home, about the man who had been told to wait. Mara signed the warrant. Her hand didn't shake. The arrest happened without spectacle. Crow's lead executive, Ethan Crow himself, sat at the conference table in a glass-walled office overlooking the valley. He was tall, impeccably groomed, silver threaded through dark hair at the temples. His suit fit too well, confidence tailored into every seam. When the deputies entered, he rose slowly, smoothing his cuffs, expression mild. "This is unnecessary," he said. "We're partners with the county." Mara met his gaze. "Not today." As the cuffs closed around his wrists, Crow's composure cracked, not into rage, but disbelief. He had always assumed the system would bend back into place. Kestrel stood just inside the doorway. He did not look at Crow. He did not bark or bare his teeth. He stood close to Reed, body relaxed, presence unyielding, as if the man at the table no longer mattered. Reed watched the scene with a quiet detachment that surprised him. There was no triumph in it, only relief, and a deeper, steadier resolve. Crow glanced once toward the dog. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. The fallout came quickly. Mara's phone filled with missed calls. A supervisor hinted at review. A colleague offered sympathy without eye contact. The cost of the signature settled in. June stopped by the cabin that night, a bandage on her knuckle and a tired smile on her face. "They won't thank you," she told Mara, over coffee gone lukewarm. "They never do." Mara nodded. "I didn't do it for thanks." Outside, snow began to fall again, softening the edges of the world. Reed stepped onto the porch with Kestrel at his side. The dog looked out over the valley, ears relaxed now, as if a tension had finally eased. "It's not over," June said quietly behind them. Reed knew that. Systems rarely collapsed cleanly, but something fundamental had shifted. A lie exposed loses its power to hide. Kestrel leaned against Reed's leg, solid and warm. Reed rested a hand on the dog's shoulder. "You stayed," he murmured. "That mattered." Kestrel didn't respond. He didn't need to. The truth lay beneath the ice, and it had been brought into the light. Not by force, not by noise, but by refusal to look away. The offer came without ceremony. No press release, no handshake in front of cameras, just a voicemail left on Reed Calder's phone while snow tapped lightly against the cabin window. "Seasonal SAR rotation," June said in the message. "Limited scope. No rank, no spotlight. We need steady hands. Think about it." Reed listened twice, then set the phone down. Outside, the valley lay quiet beneath a thin veil of new snow. Winter was loosening its grip, not gone but no longer clenched. The kind of morning that felt unfinished, waiting for someone to decide what it would become. Kestrel stood near the door, his familiar post. The German shepherd's frame was strong and balanced now, the last traces of injury fully faded. His coat was thick and clean, black and tan catching the pale light. He watched Reed without expectation, amber eyes calm, alert, present. Reed poured coffee he didn't drink and sat at the small table, hands wrapped around the mug for warmth more than need. Going back meant risk. Not physical risk. That had never been the part that scared him. But the quieter danger of reattachment, of caring again, of losing again. He had come to the valley to disappear. Somewhere along the way, the valley had refused to let him. Reed picked up the phone and called June back. "I'll do it," he said when she answered. There was a pause, then a breath he hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Good," she replied. "Orientation's tomorrow. Dawn." When the call ended, Reed didn't feel relief. He felt alignment, the sense of something settling into place after being wrong for too long. The paperwork was minimal. Deputy Mara Voss handled it herself, meeting Reed at the small SAR office in Ridgehaven. She looked different now. Not softer, but clearer. The lines of tension around her eyes remained, but there was less doubt in them. "They won't make this easy," she said as she slid the forms across the desk. "No medals, no apologies, just work." Reed nodded. "That's fine." Mara glanced down at Kestrel, who sat at Reed's side, posture impeccable. "He's cleared," she added. "Reinstated as K-9 support. Provisional status." Reed raised an eyebrow. "Provisional?" Mara allowed herself a small smile. "Paperwork needs time to catch up with reality." Kestrel's tail flicked once against the floor. Outside, a few SAR volunteers gathered near the trucks. New faces, old gear. One of them, a woman in her late 20s with a wind-reddened face and short blonde hair tucked under a beanie, gave Reed a curious look. She was tall and athletic, movements quick and efficient. The kind of person who learned by doing and trusted action over talk. "Name's Lila Morse," she said, extending a hand. "Avalanche Tech. Heard about you." Reed shook her hand. "Probably not the good parts." Lila smiled without humor. "Good parts don't matter out here." They loaded gear in companionable silence. No speeches, no grand moment, just preparation. As the convoy prepared to roll, Kestrel stopped. He lifted his head and stared down the valley road, not toward the mountains, but back toward the cabin Reed had planned to leave behind. He didn't move, didn't sit, didn't block Reed's path. He simply waited. Reed followed the line of the dog's gaze and felt something twist gently in his chest. The cabin wasn't calling him back. It was acknowledging what had already changed. Reed rested a hand briefly on Kestrel's shoulder. "We'll come back," he said. The dog blinked once, then turned and walked toward the truck. That was enough. The first call-out came faster than Reed expected. A hiker slipped on a thawing ridge, leg broken, daylight fading. Nothing dramatic. No danger of headlines. Just a person cold, frightened, and in pain. Reed and Kestrel moved without needing instruction. The rhythm returned easily, the quiet communication, the trust built from shared attention. Kestrel found the scent quickly, guided them along a safer route, stopped when the ground softened underfoot. They reached the hiker before dark. The man, a middle-aged accountant from Boise with glasses fogged from fear, looked up in disbelief when he saw them. "I thought no one would come," he said, voice shaking. Reed knelt. "We always come." They carried him down carefully, methodically. No cameras, no applause. Just the crunch of snow and the steady breath of a dog who knew exactly where to place his feet. Later, as they loaded the hiker into the ambulance, Lila gave Reed a quiet nod of respect. Mara watched from a distance, hands in her jacket pockets, expression unreadable but resolute. June clapped Reed on the shoulder. "You're back," she said. Reed shook his head gently. "No, I'm here." The cabin stood waiting when they returned that night. Reed stepped inside for the last time, not to abandon it, but to close a chapter. He packed what he needed, left the rest. The place had served its purpose. Snow fell lightly as dawn broke the next morning. Reed slung his pack over his shoulder and turned toward the door. Kestrel stood there. Same position as the first day. Same stillness. Same quiet authority. Back then, Reed had walked away unsure, wounded, alone. This time he stopped. He looked at the dog, not as a tool, not as a sign, but as a presence that had chosen him as much as he had chosen it. "Ready?" Reed asked. Kestrel didn't move. He waited. Reed stepped forward. Together they crossed the threshold. The dog does not know right from wrong, but it always stands on the side of life. And sometimes, that is all a human needs. To stop running. Sometimes, miracles do not arrive as thunder or fire from the sky. They arrive quietly, through instinct, through loyalty, through a presence that refuses to move when danger stands ahead. Perhaps God does not always speak in words. Sometimes he places a warning in our path. Sometimes he sends a guide that does not know right or wrong, but always stands on the side of life. In our daily lives, we are often tired, distracted, and tempted to walk past what feels heavy or inconvenient. Yet faith is not about being fearless. It is about listening. when something tells us to stop, to look again, to care. If this story moved you, maybe it is not by accident. Maybe it is a reminder that you are not walking alone, and that even in silence, God is still watching over you. Share this story with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you are watching from. Subscribe to K9 Navy SEAL Legends if you believe that courage, faith, and loyalty still matter. May God protect you, guide your steps, and bless you and your loved ones wherever you are.